Part 22. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 212. Garen let out a breath and walked to the side of the ship without saying any more. The first time he fought against Andrila, he saw that he was a gentle person on the surface, but actually crazy on the inside. Since you have decided, it's up to you. Nightmare shrugged. At this time, he was in the form of a young and lovely girl, and his appearance was clearly that of Andrila's sister Isis. Okay, let's not talk about this anymore. Lila, do you like my form? Do you want something exciting tonight? She held the hem of her purple skirt and spun it around. Biological brothers and sisters. Andrila's expression remained unchanged. It's a pity I don't have this hobby. Don't you think this is exciting? Not at all. How about I change it? Be sure not to be my mother. The two of them started flirting and scolding each other as if no one was around. Palasha went back to his room to rest alone, leaving Galen alone on the deck standing on the side of the ship, looking into the distance. The hull of the boat swayed slightly with the waves, giving people a sense of unrest like duckweed. On the blue sea level in the distance, a group of smooth gray dolphins jumped up from time to time. Their dorsal fins cut through the sea at high speed, leaving white traces. He pressed his hand on the cold black railing, stroking the somewhat damaged rough paint surface. The sea breeze blew on my face and into my neck, feeling salty and cold. Xianflan, he murmured. In fact, since he really saw Xianflan, it was during the meeting in the Silver Mirror. He no longer had much desire to delve deeper into the old man's truth. Both Xianflan and the old man are just ordinary people living in this world in a sad and confused way. And this time, it can be regarded as the time to completely settle the grudges with Immortal Palace. What? What are you thinking about? A strange voice came from beside you. Nothing, just some feelings, Garen replied calmly. Standing behind him on the left side is a middle-aged man with a curly beard holding a cigarette. His overall image is like an aristocratic gentleman from Europe. His hair was combed to a shiny finish, he was wearing a black tuxedo, and he was playing with a small silver pistol in his hand, making clicking sounds from time to time. Major General Nikan, we all have our own reasons. What about you? Why did you participate in this operation? Garen glanced at this top master known as the Gun King. Me, just for a little reason. I heard that the scenery of Smoke Island is very good. I have wanted to go up there for a long time. Seeing that he didn't want to say anything, Garen smiled. Let's change the question. What's your attitude towards this operation? What are our chances of winning? The odds of winning? It depends on what the goal is, Nikan said. Different goals have different degrees of certainty. Garen shrugged and asked no more questions. It was in vain anyway. The fleet moved slowly but surely towards the Smoke Island. The sky gradually turned dark, and the sea gradually turned into a dull blue-black color. The fine moonlight shone on the water, making it sparkling. After gathering on the deck, the five people did not meet again. They just stayed in their own rooms and adjusted their status. The next day was a real fierce battle, and the slightest negative impact could be the difference between life and death. The fleet took advantage of the darkness to speed up, and soon the thick white mist of the Smoke Island could be seen in the distance. Puff! Columns of air spewed out of the chimney one after another. Garen stood in his bedroom and looked out through the ship window. He could faintly see the thick white smoke outside. With his eyesight, he could only see no more than 2 meters of the sea. Suddenly the ship began to shake, and things in the room began to slide and shake. Woo! A piercing alarm sounded suddenly. What's going on? There were rapid footsteps in the corridor of the cabin, and someone was asking loudly. Something hit the bottom of the boat. Bang! A dull explosion shook the entire ship. Garen knew something was wrong, so he picked up the food and water supplies he had packed and rushed to the door and opened it. Bang bang! There were 2 more violent vibrations, and a strong burnt smell began to fill the air. The corridor that opened the door was full of sailors rushing to the deck. "What's going on?" Garin asked someone casually. "Sir, the ship has hit a mine. We are repairing it right away," the sailor replied with his face covered in black engine oil and sweating profusely. Garin let go of the sailor, pushed through the crowd and rushed directly to the deck. There were already fires in some places on the deck, and the sailors were holding water hoses to spray them. He saw Palasha already standing on the deck, and Andrila and Nightmare just rushed out from behind him. When the four of them met, Garin was about to ask when he suddenly saw a red fire flying towards him from the corner of his eye. His expression changed, and he didn't have time to think too much. He put all his strength on his feet and jumped out of the side of the ship and towards the water. Boom! The ship, which was hundreds of meters long, exploded with a bang, and the entire hull was blown into two pieces in the middle. Like a broken paper boat, it sank quickly in the middle. Boom boom boom. A series of shellings continuously splashed water columns on the sea surface. The white water columns rose high and fell like rain, making a splashing sound on the sponge. Garin was floating in the cold water. He had barely swam a few meters when he felt a numbness on the top of his head, as if something sharp was pricking his scalp. No, he kicked his feet violently and jumped more than 10 meters away. Boom! Where he was in the sea water, a thick white water column suddenly splashed up. On the entire dark sea, black ships continued to light up with red fire, and some were hit by fire. Some are the flashes of gun barrels returning fire. The entire Federal fleet is being attacked by an unknown fleet. On the sea in the distance, a huge fleet also lit up with dots of fire, which were the flickers of countless gun barrels firing cannonballs. Garin swam quickly in the sea, his clothes were torn to pieces, and the suitcase in his hand was hit by the cannonball and was directly smashed to pieces. He quickly swam to a lifebuoy that had been put down, and used his arms to support himself on the lifebuoy. With a splash, he broke out of the water, rested on the lifebuoy, and landed lightly on a nearby intact ship. "Fight back!" Gun King Nikon's roar came from not far away. "Fight back! Kill them! These damn Weissmon bitches! Sooner or later, I will chop them all into pieces and feed them to the dogs." Boom! Before he finished speaking, the ship was also hit hard. Garin only felt a roar in front of his eyes, and his ears were buzzing, as if there were some bells that kept echoing and repeating in his ears. All of a sudden, his eyes were filled with red flames. Exploding flames exploded on the deck not far from him, like a blazing red lotus. His whole body was thrown away and fell into the sea again. Garin stepped on his toes wildly, leveraging his strength on the sea water, and ran for more than 10 meters, landing on a piece of broken ship fragments and standing still. My ears couldn't hear anything, and my eyes still had a dazzling red afterimage, and I could barely see anything clearly. Garin knew that he could do nothing. This was a naval battle between large fleets, and his personal power was extremely weak. Now he could only wait for the result quietly. I don't know how long it took, but my ears and eyes gradually returned to normal. Garin rubbed his temples and looked around. The entire sea was in a mess, and the Federation's huge fleet had completely disappeared, turning into countless ship fragments floating on the sea. Some sailors who survived were holding lifebuoys and moving closer to larger debris. But because it was too dark at night, only a few people could find the right direction. Moreover, this part was somewhat distorted by the wind and waves, and was soon submerged by the cold sea water. "Augustus! I'm going to kill you sooner or later," the crazy roar of gunslinger Nikon came from the distant sea. Grumble! In the distance, in the direction of the smoke island, a high-pitched cry like a bird suddenly sounded. As if in response to Nikon's wrath. Birdsong sounds defiant and contemptuous. "Everyone, go directly to the island," Palasha's voice sounded directly in the sea. Everyone heard clearly. "Wow wow wow! 4 sounds of water sounded one after another, and 4 figures jumped up at the same time, walking on the water and rushing towards the smoke island. Garin was about to get up as well, when he suddenly found that his hands were light and the box was completely gone. His body was also in tatters, and his left pocket was completely torn. He quickly reached in and touched it. My golden sword seat. His expression changed slightly. The 2 antiques of doom, the golden sword stand and the golden seal, were carried close to the body in this pocket for easy absorption of potential. Unexpectedly, they were blown up by a series of bombardments just now. Galen, Palasha's voice came from afar. Garin was slightly unwilling to give in, but still jumped up, stamped his feet quickly on the sea, and rushed towards the smoke island with the help of his strength. Smoke Island's southern coast. 3 figures wearing white fur coats were looking at the 5 people walking on the sea from a distance. It's the White Peacock. These damn clowns defeated our fleet, and yet they dare to blame us, the tall man with his hair standing on end said with a gloomy expression. Leave here immediately. The White Peacock people have already determined that it was us. The Clown's Queen completely copied my bombardment technique, another figure said calmly. Isn't this just right? Have a good fight with the White Peacock people. A small organization that has just emerged wants to reach the top of the world. How can it be done without giving them some setbacks? The last person said with a smile. It's time to leave. The leading man turned around and walked toward the island, followed closely by the other man. Only the last one was left to scream, but was ignored at all. On the rock in the shelter on the other side, a group of clowns in strange costumes were looking at the 5 figures rushing towards them from a distance. These clowns all wore thick clothes and hats, all dressed in the same appearance. Even their body shapes were obscured by the thick costumes, making it impossible to tell who was who. Hey, let's do it, the clown at the front said in a sharp voice, and it was unclear whether he was a man or a woman. Hey, the other clowns laughed strangely, and their voices were exactly the same as the first one, with no tone at all. They all took out a series of black and slender rocket launchers from their backs, and skillfully bumped into the rocket launchers. Then he aimed at the 5 people running towards him. Tisk tisk tisk. The dense rocket launchers dragged white smoke towards the 5 people on the sea. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 213. Boom boom boom. The rocket launcher exploded on the sea, and the flames were like blooming red flower buds, which were extremely conspicuous and beautiful at night. Garin tipped his toes and fired a stream of water arrows that hit the rocket launcher. With a bang, a violent explosion exploded on the sea not far in front of him. He protected his face with one hand. Wait until the airflow explosion debris disperses before putting it down. How to solve it? He looked at the other people, and was surprised to find that the gun leader Nikan had taken out the small silver pistol and aimed it in the direction of the rocket launcher with a gloomy expression. Laugh. There was a small sound, the small pistol lit up with a red light, and then fell silent. At the same time, a clown on the cliff scoffed and nailed a small silver spiked ball to his chest. It hurriedly reached out to grab it. Laugh. The small ball suddenly exploded and turned into countless thin needles, shooting out in all directions. Silently, the entire group of clowns were pierced by fine needles and fell to the ground. Let's go, the scene has become so big, why not just shoot? Nikan blew the muzzle of the gun and regained his gentle expression. The 2 of them immediately rushed out again. On the sea, Garin stepped on the water and finally reached the beach. Rather than treading water, it is better to say treading water, using huge physical strength to step on the water, and then rush forward with explosive force. He was not a master of light arts. He was already soaked when he came ashore, and his cold clothes clung to his body, making him look tattered and extremely embarrassed. As soon as he landed on the beach, he saw that the 4 members of Palasha Nightmare were already waiting for him. They were obviously faster than him in the sea water. It's so embarrassing, Nightmare said helplessly, "Sorry about the new clothes I bought. I took a long time to select them, but they were all blown up in a flash. Not only him, but also Andrila and Gun King Nikan. Only Palasha was still clean, and even had 2 suitcases in his hands. He looked like an old gentleman who was preparing to go on a trip. It's Weissman's 3 generals. They're here too." Nikan gritted his teeth. "I must kill him with my own hands this time." "Do you want to split up or stay with us?" Palasha asked calmly. "I have another mission, so I won't be with you." Nikan shook his head. "Let's separate here." "Okay." As soon as Nikan finished speaking, he quickly rushed back to the sea and began to rescue his soldiers ashore. "Let's go too." Palasha turned and walked towards the island. Galen didn't say anything and slowly moved forward behind Palasha. The 4 of them were silent all the way and quickly explored the island. The ground is bare, covered with black hard rocks, and traces of white smoke are constantly emerging from the cracks in the stones. The smoke lingers, limiting vision to a few meters. The 4 of them left the seaside and walked on the inner island, just like walking on land, surrounded by heavy fog. The heavy fog in front seems to never end, and it is always a vast expanse of white. Palasha found a spot on the back of a large rock, squatted down, opened his suitcase and began to take out food and water for a meal. "Eat some, we probably have to stay here for a while." Andrila and Nightmare sat down respectively, picked up a piece of pancake and ate it with the poured milk. Garin took a piece of pancake and tore it into small bites while looking at the surrounding environment. The sky was completely white, and the surrounding area was also completely white. Only the ground was bare black rocky ground, and only a distance of less than 3 meters could be seen. The 4 of them are like isolated islands in the ocean, with no end in sight. He reached out and grabbed a black stone and squeezed it gently. Click. The stone shattered into black powder, revealing the honeycomb structure inside. And it was very hot inside, almost 30 or 40 degrees. The terrain here is very strange, and the geothermal heat is very high. "The smoke smells like sulfur," he whispered. "There are many secrets in the smoke island, but as long as you don't enter the ruins, there is no danger. I only heard that some tourists got lost in the fog and fell off the cliff and died, and the number was not large." Andrila explained. "We just have to be careful about other people coming to the island." He took out a piece of paper from his pocket and slowly unfolded it, revealing a map. This is a partial topographic map of Smoke Island. It was drawn by someone before. However, it is of little use and is only for reference. Several people came up to take a closer look. There is a long strip of island drawn on the map, which is divided into 2 parts, marked South Territory and North Territory respectively. The 2 areas are marked with small dots, and there are names next to them. There are some famous scenic spots on the Smoke Island. They are all different groups of portraits, numbered 1 to 9 respectively. "Which one should we choose?" Andrila asked. "Tomorrow is the night of the full moon. If we want to enter the ruins, we must meet 2 conditions. One is a master of telekinesis, and that's me," Nightmare replied lazily. "The second one is the key." Garin took over. "The question is, where is the key?" "The biggest possibility is that they are in the crowd of portraits. The 3 Weissman generals who just attacked us should also be here," Nightmare said casually. "The clothes I just bought were ruined. I have to settle this account with them." The golden sword holder and golden seal were lost for no reason, and Garin felt inexplicably unhappy. These were antiques of misfortune, with potential value, and now they were completely reduced to rubbish by the other party. "We." Suddenly, a burst of laughter came from the thick fog not far away. "Who?" Andrila's eyes flashed with cold light, and the silver light in her hand disappeared. With a clang, a clown wearing red and green clothes slowly walked out of the white mist. His face was covered with a red mask, and the corner of his mouth was split from the corner to the ear, like a bloody mouth. He was throwing away a throwing knife in his hand. I'm so lucky to be able to see people here who were also attacked. The clown's sharp and unpleasant voice rang in several people's ears. We were also attacked by Wiseman's 3 generals. Our ships were destroyed and we were about to seek revenge from them. Oh? Do you know where they are? Nightmare took out a white pear from somewhere and took a bite. Of course, those people are about to get the key. Somehow, their information is too accurate. The clown's strange emphasis seemed a bit awkward, as if the key was the most important item for the entrance to the ruins, but he was confused. The deputy laughed and gloated. How's it going? Do you want to go? You informed a lot of people, right? Garen asked in a low voice. Of course. Who dared them to openly attack the people who came to the island this time? If they don't teach them a lesson, they really think that the Wiseman government is invincible in the world, the clown replied sharply. So how many of you are there? Garen continued to ask. Do you think I can answer this question? The clown chuckled. That's right. But why do we have to believe you? Because you have to go. Anyone who wants to get the key will not miss this opportunity. They are to the north, go that way, and I will guide you, the clown said with a smile. We have something in common. The enemies, deal with them first, then take action after the key. He took the lead and walked in one direction. Palacios stood still, his face expressionless, and it was impossible to tell what he was thinking. The other 2 just smiled without any additional actions. Garen's eyes narrowed slightly, and suddenly he vaguely seemed to smell something. He raised his feet and walked out, not in the direction led by the clown, but in the opposite direction. You're on the wrong track, the clown looked back at him. Come with me, they're over here. I need to ask you where I'm going. Garen frowned and walked forward without hesitation. The clown came back and stood in front of Garen. You can't go this way. It's better to come with me. What do you mean? Garen's face turned slightly cold. Better get out of my way right now. Little guy, you must not go down this road, otherwise I will be very angry. A strange smile appeared on the clown mask. Move out of the way. Garen's nose faintly smelled something coming from this direction, and his voice suddenly became cold. If you want to die, I can help you. A hint of chill gradually appeared in the clown's words. Looking for death? Hee, just let me see how you want me to die. Garen's expression was grim. He opened his big hand and grabbed it towards the opposite side. Boom! An invisible aura suddenly enveloped the clown, and its claws were like green and black steel claws, grabbing his face brazenly. The invisible strong wind blew the surrounding white mist violently, blowing to both sides like a wave. Woo! The clown screamed loudly, threw down his sleeves, and a large number of black grenades fell out. His body was extremely fast to avoid the catch. Boom! The 2 retreated as soon as they touched, and a violent explosion exploded in the middle. The fire swept away and blew away a large amount of white mist around them. Idle! East King's hand. Garen's eyes sharpened, and he instantly turned into a black shadow and rushed out. He grabbed the clown with his palms up and down, and the air was filled with a harsh scream from his claws. A transparent wall seemed to appear out of thin air in front of him. The wall was formed by the rotation and entanglement of countless air cyclones. It was like a huge boulder pressing down on the top, tearing towards the clown and surrounding it. The clown let out a sharp scream and turned around to escape. Tear! The clown's body was suddenly torn in half, and blood rained all around. Garen's hands were still 2 meters away from him. Vulnerable, he snorted coldly and walked slowly to the clown's head. Slap and crush the clown's head. With the tip of his toe, a silver card flew into his hand. The playing cards are made of metal and have a black and white imp pattern printed on them. It's the clown from Solitaire. Nightmare covered her nose with a scented handkerchief and walked over slowly. The Clown King has 10 clones under him. They all have different code names, and you should be one of them. I heard that the clown is covered in poison or traps, and all of them are masters of poison. It's a pity that he was killed before he saw it. You were torn in half through the air. He took a closer look at Garen. Killing people with air currents from across the air. Garen, have you reached that state now? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 214. Garen didn't answer, just threw the card to Nightmare. Let's go, there seems to be something in that direction. He walked directly in the direction he just decided. Nightmare and Andrilla looked at Palasha. The latter shook his head and said in a low voice, "We don't need to create extraneous problems. I think you'd better go take a look." "It may be necessary." Garen turned around and said. Palasha closed his eyes and stopped answering. Garen didn't bother to say more. He walked towards the thick fog. Andrilla and Nightmare were speechless. They looked at each other and finally followed Garen. "Although I had long expected that there might be disagreements and parting ways, I didn't expect it to happen so early," Andrilla said helplessly, "but everyone has their own purpose, and their opinions and actions are different. Galen and Palasha is both the top martial artist, and it is normal for them to move in different ways." "I don't care." Nightmare hung lazily on Andrilla's shoulders and walked leaning on him. "I'm so bored lately, Lila, I have a suggestion." "You'd better stop talking." Andrilla stopped quickly. "Lila, what do you think when we get to the center of the island and have everyone gathered and have an open-air field battle? Don't you want to be famous?" "Then you will be famous all over the world," Nightmare suggested lazily. "I won't do any tricks." "Do you mind?" "Of course you don't mind." Andrilla was speechless. "It'll be fine if you change your physical appearance." What should I do? He knew that Nightmare could do it. If such a thing really happened, Nightmare would say no. When Zun was excited, it was normal for him to be stunned by a sneak attack and immediately cause a big drama. "And I don't want to be famous, I just want to, oh, I won't say it anymore, I can't explain it to you." The three of them walked into the thick fog and soon disappeared. Palasha still sat there, eyes slightly closed, motionless. In the thick fog, Garen strode forward in the direction of the smell. Soon, some bloodstains gradually appeared on the black rock ground in front of him. The blood was dark red and black, obviously it had been there for some time. Walking further, I suddenly heard a crackling sound in front of me. It was not loud, like something burning grease. Soon, a pile of burning flames appeared in front of Garen. The green and red flames burned slowly on a pile of messy corpses, and thick black smoke continued to float out. Garen stood in front of the fire and took a look at the corpse above. "All clowns." Nightmare walked over and glanced at it, and received it casually. The cause of death was that the chest was pierced by a steel needle. It is very similar to Nikon's previous method. "It seems that the person who attacked us on the sea just now is probably the Joker." Garen narrowed his eyes and whispered, "Maybe it is the person they want to blame Weissman. Whatever, let's not worry about anything else. Go directly to the location of the key. Whether it's to open the ruins tomorrow or fight for the key, you have to go to the statue group over there." "Why don't we go there earlier? See what's there in the Southern Territory. People stay. Both the Southern Territory and the Northern Territory have separate keys." "Of course," Andrilla replied, 2 on each side. "Only 4 people can compete for the black tobacco pot. I remember rushing across from the map. We need to pass through 2 key places in the middle, right?" Garen has a very good memory and just memorized the map. "A canyon gap or a cliff edge are all very easy to be ambushed. The map is a map, but do you have a way to identify the direction in the fog?" Nightmare frowned. "Then how do they identify the direction?" Garen knelt down and took a closer look at the clown's body on the fire. Nightmare squatted down and began to look at the patterns on the ground. "Let's just follow the old method. The rocks on the ground here have fixed lines. As long as you follow the direction of the lines, you will be fine. As long as you meet a living person, it will be easy. This is the only way. Garen frowned and said, let's go there as soon as possible, and if you encounter a living person, just capture him and question him. He glanced at the texture of the ground and strode out in the other direction. The two men followed closely behind. The rocks in front are getting higher and higher, and there are deep ravines and gaps between some of them, so I have to jump over them. The smoke in the cracks on the ground is getting thicker and thicker, and it is almost impossible to see the 2 meters around it. The three of them can only rely on their sense of smell and hearing to avoid getting lost. Soon, a pile of corpses appeared on the ground in front of them again. They were all soldiers in white clothes. They had no medals or national emblems. The three of them checked the characteristics of the corpses and found nothing. Continuing to walk forward, bursts of explosions and roars could be heard from time to time, seemingly in a very far away direction. There were also gunshots and vague roars. The surrounding thick fog covered everything completely. Has it started yet? Fighting for the key. Garen looked at the direction of the explosion from a distance. The keys have been out for a long time, but I don't know who has them. It is said that the keys were brought in from outside. There are 2 in the south and north. They open 2 entrances respectively, and you can enter the ruins. But I heard that the so-called ruins are not. It's not big, it's very small, and it's unclear which ruins the black tobacco bottle is in. Andrila explained. Garen stopped talking and continued to walk around the corpse and follow the lines. In the thick white fog, a group of figures in clown uniforms quietly came to the clown's body. The body was bloody and cut into 2 pieces, which was too horrible to look at. They held red torches in their hands, and the flames dimly illuminated their masked faces. The white ghost only had time to report the news before he was killed. The leading clown made a strange voice, as if his voice was trembling. We underestimated the white peacock. Give up blocking them and switch to someone else. Our agreement with Immortal Palace is to reduce the number of unqualified participants as much as possible. Since they are qualified, let them in. The leading clown whispered. Queen, if it were you, would you be sure to escape unscathed? He suddenly turned to ask a clown on his right. I do not know. So we're not sure. The clown in the lead paused. Forget it, let's go. You guys split up to check other sections of the road. Yes. All the clowns immediately dispersed. The lead clown was left alone. He slowly walked to the corpse, squatted down, reached out and pinched the skin of the corpse. What a domineering power! Such vicious moves. His usually joking eyes gradually flashed with a hint of solemnity. Boom! Garen slapped a masked man in black on the waist. The opponent's missile flew out like a cannonball and hit a stone not far away. The bones in his body made a crackling sound. I don't know how many bones were broken, and he was completely breathless. He stood up straight and glanced around. The ground was littered with corpses of men in black clothes, with a white clown pattern on the corpses' black clothes. Andrila and Nightmare also came from the other 2 directions. Andrila shook the blood off her sword. These people are still clowns. What role can they play by arranging them here? Send them to death. Maybe it's to screen out the qualifications to participate in the competition. Nightmare yawned. It's so boring. It's just a little better than ordinary people, but it's useless in just one click. It's not fun at all. The 3 of them were standing in front of a narrow tunnel. In front of them was a passage between 2 mountain walls, which was just big enough for one person to pass through. The passage between the black rocks looked even more bottomless in the thick fog. Are you leaving? Nightmare asked casually. Of course. Garen strode into the tunnel. Suddenly his expression changed and he quickly jumped backwards. Boom! There was a deafening huge explosion. Large swaths of red flames accompanied by rubble rushed toward the 3 of them. Clang, clang, clang. Andrila's body suddenly appeared in front of Garen, and the long sword in her hand instantly turned into a silver mirror, directly cutting all the rubble into pieces, and even the flames were completely blocked. The three people were rushed tens of meters away by the huge impact, and several scorch marks were drawn on the ground. Throughout this area, seen from above, a red mushroom cloud slowly rises, and strong winds roll up around it, blowing away the area shrouded in white mist. Large expanses of black rocky ground were exposed. Clown King, Garen was completely furious. He was already furious when he lost the golden sword holder and the golden seal. Now he was attacked by clowns one after another. In just a moment, he was almost completely blown up by the buried explosives. If he hadn't felt that something was wrong with the surrounding ground environment, which seemed to have been moved by someone, he might have been injured by this explosion. He wasn't afraid of bullets, but that didn't mean he wasn't afraid of being hit completely in the front by high-yield explosives. Not only him, Nightmare and Andrilla were also disgraced, no longer as calm and relaxed as before. "Let's go," Garen waved his hand and smashed away a stone that was blown up, and strode forward. Being attacked one after another and falling into a state of embarrassment and passivity, he became increasingly impatient. "My makeup," Nightmare cried sadly, trying to take out the dressing mirror to make up for the stained face. When he touched his pocket, he found that the dressing mirror had been completely broken into countless pieces. "Damn Clown King, don't let me see you." Andrilla silently dusted off the dirt on her body. The three of them accelerated one after another, following the lines on the ground and rushing towards the first point. In the center of the southern territory, there is a strange area without any fog. Black stone statues stand here one after another, standing or sitting with different movements, forming a dense forest of black stone. In the middle of the forest of statues, there is an open space surrounded by stone statues without any obstacles. A group of people wearing black coats were walking cautiously in this open space. They stayed close to the stone statues and jumped to difficult places. They were extremely cautious about the wide and flat open spaces. "This is it, everyone, be careful." "Are you okay, Tailai?" The blonde woman walking in the front looked back worriedly. "It's okay, I can still hold on. Don't think of me as a little flower in the greenhouse," a middle-aged man in the back row of the team replied. He was chewing on a black pipe, and he even smashed it and took a puff from time to time. "By the way, what about the things we found? Are there any results?" He looked at a fat bearded man to one side. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 215. "No, I've never seen this thing before. It's a bit like Guyen Duo's style, but I can't match it with any of Guyen Duo's historical periods," the bearded man said helplessly. "Bai Ying, are you feeling better?" Tailai Mercury looked at the last person in the team, his closest assistant and partner, Bai Ying. At this time, Bai Ying looked like a sloppy drunk who had drunk too much. His face was haggard, his eye sockets were sunken, and his originally bright golden hair also looked dull, but his eyes shone with a keen luster. He looked up at his old friend Tailai Mercury. "It's okay," his voice was hoarse. "It's just that the consumption is a bit high. Those men in black just now were very troublesome." Tailai Mercury nodded and said no more. The group continued to move forward, and soon the detective dug out a small piece of black metal from a stone statue and handed it to the fat man with a beard. "Check it out." The fat man with a big beard took it and looked at it carefully for a long time, and finally shook his head helplessly. "Sorry. This is beyond the scope of my knowledge." Miss Sillen looked at the fat man with a beard helplessly. This appraisal expert was a professional appraiser they specially invited for this trip. However, most of the things they encountered along the way just said they didn't know, and only a few of them said they didn't know. "I can barely identify some information. My first reaction to anything is to say sorry. If this continues, I don't know when we will be able to find traces of the other party. You must know that these stone pieces are clues left by the person who kidnapped the two children. This is a clue left deliberately. If no other clues can be found, Saiwaka and Eve may die. It would be great if Mr. Kelly were here. There are too few studies on the ancient Yinduo civilization now, she sighed. Yes, if Kelly is here. Tali Mercury did not continue and his voice became lower. During this journey, they were actually led to the island by a group of mysterious people. The detective's daughter Eve and White Eagle's son Saiwaka were both kidnapped by a group of mysterious people. They were asked to go to the island if they wanted to save them. Island. The other party obviously has an ulterior motive. But they really had no choice but to do it. The clues that the other party used to guide them forward were the small black stones left in advance. They deliberately created a riddle for us to guess. Tali Mercury stopped and looked calm. Perhaps this is a game in which we have no choice. The opponent's power is far stronger than ours, so they set the rules, and we can only follow the rules. Don't panic, there is no possibility of winning if you panic. But Eve and Saiwaka. Don't worry, the children also need some training. Tali forced a smile, trying not to sound anxious. Don't worry, Tali, I have this sword, we still have a certain ability to protect ourselves. Bai Ying comforted. Yes, Tali nodded. Let's take a rest first. The detective sat down on the instep of a stone statue. The group of people immediately sat down to rest, without any particular intention at all. 19 years ago, my parents were burned to death on this island. Bai Ying sat down and pulled out a small copper necklace from his collar. The necklace pendant was similar to a pocket watch. He opened the pendant with a snap, and there was a black and white photo embedded inside. This is my father. He gently rubbed the glass on the surface of the photo. I didn't expect that 19 years later, I would also land on this island. He held the white sword in his hand tightly, and his face flashed. A hint of complexity. Bang bang. Suddenly 2 piercing gunshots were heard in the distance. Walk. The group of people immediately stood up and rushed towards the direction of the gunfire. Passing through the stone statues, a larger and wider open space soon appeared in front of them. Several waves of people were already standing above, each occupying a corner. Lying on the ground was the body of a man in black, which was obviously the result of the gunfire just now. Mercury in the tower looked carefully and saw that there were 3 waves of people in the open space, standing clearly separated. 2 groups were confronting each other, and the atmosphere was slightly tense. On the left side of these 2 groups were a group of werewolves with wolf heads and human bodies, and on the right side were 3 tall men wearing white trench coats. The werewolves looked unhappy and stared at the 3 people across from them. Although they were more numerous, their expressions showed that they were obviously wary. Mr. Bediga, the leader of the wolf tribe, actually sneaked to the island, and it seems that he brought many tribesmen with him. What, you also want to get your hands on the black tobacco pot? A tall man in a white coat stood up and said with a smile. The black hair on his chest fluttered in the wind, and he looked inexplicably happy. Didn't General Wiseman also sneak up on the island? Since you can go there, why can't we? The tall black werewolf in the lead replied coldly. Besides, even the Clown King of Solitaire has taken part in person. This event is much more powerful than the last one. Do you want us to help you? The capture of the Clown King is an internal obligation of our Admiral Wiseman, so we won't let you worry about it. The tall man headed by the 3 generals said calmly. There is also the traitor Gafade. We will deal with them all this time. Even if you, the General of Glory, take action in person, I'm afraid you don't know the specific situation, right? The leader of the Wolf clan said loudly. The Clown King has formed an alliance with the Immortal Palace. He is now considered a member of the Immortal Palace's alliance. If you want to deal with him, it is not it's that simple. Really? Guangrong's Hequan's face wrinkled slightly, and then he stopped making any sound, as if he was thinking about something. When Tali Mercury and others entered this area, they did not attract the attention of others at all. Their group looked like small characters who got to the island by chance, and no one paid any attention to them. That is to say, some cautious experts looked at them casually and looked away when they found no suitable targets. As they came, gradually, many more people gathered here. This is where the entrance to the southern domain ruins appears. The key must be inserted into a stone statue here to open the ruins. So even after obtaining the key, if you want to open the ruins, you must come here. Waves of forces gradually entered this open space, including elites from the Federation, Tulip's Special Operations Forces, and some unknown people whose backgrounds could not be discerned. What is strange is that almost all of these people are injured, there are only a few of them, and their faces are not very good looking. It seems that they have also been attacked. Mercury in the tower whispered to Silan Baying, "Now, there are Weissman's 3 generals on the field, and the leader of the wolf tribe is also there. The Clown King should not, even people from the Immortal Palace would not dare to appear alone." Although the scene seems a bit tense, this is actually the safest place. Weissman's 3 generals have always been upright. As the strongest force, they should stabilize the order on the scene. Silan nodded in approval. "Bai Ying, are you okay now?" "It's okay." Bai Ying's face was filled with bulging veins, and he held the white sword tightly in his hand. Huge black runes were vaguely flashing on the sword. "I can still hold it in," he replied in a low voice through gritted teeth. The 3 of them looked at Bai Ying worriedly, fearing that he would not be able to suppress the negative emotions in his heart. This sword is the legendary rune sword, which has mysterious and terrifying power. If it weren't for this sword, they wouldn't have been able to get here. But to use such a rune sword, the prerequisite is to have extremely tough individual strength and will. Bai Ying is still a bit weak in strength. If he hadn't relied on willpower to hold on, he probably wouldn't have been able to bear it long ago. "Are we just going to wait here?" "Wait until tomorrow," Fatty, the appraisal expert, asked in a low voice. "No, the key should have been brought, and it is with the 3 generals and the leader of the wolf tribe. From now on, until tomorrow's full moon, it is time to look at the methods of all parties. However, if you can snatch it from the 3 generals and the wolf tribe, the person who takes the key." Mercury in Talai shook his head speechlessly. By showing up like this, they clearly told the Clown King that if they want the key, they will stand here. As long as the other party is brave enough, they will come and get it themselves. He paused. "At the same time, they are announcing to everyone, the key is in their hands, and those who have the guts can grab it themselves. As long as they are not afraid of death." "Too arrogant." Miss Silan took a breath. "Elites from all over the world have gathered here. Even Tulip has sent troops. This is Wiseman's style. They want to dominate the world. This is their usual style." Talai Mercury nodded. "Now let's see if anyone dares to stand up and take action. I just don't know who captured Eve and the others. Everyone, please pay attention." At this moment, a group of men and women wearing red cloaks walked quickly into the area. The red-eyed woman in the lead looked around, and her eyes immediately focused on the 3 generals of Wiseman. "Glorious hell, it's a pleasure to see you again." The woman pressed her right fist on her chest and bowed slightly. "Elizel, are you here for the keys too?" Glorious Power asked calmly. He had a small black beard on his lips and looked serious and rigid. "The real battle will begin after the entrance to the ruins is opened." "It's too early to say this now," the red-eyed woman replied. "That's not necessarily the case. Whoever holds the key is qualified to use the black smoke pot. Otherwise, even if someone comes in front of the black smoke pot, they will not be able to use it." The leader of the wolf clan interjected. "Elizel, have you, the Demon Hunter Alliance, really decided to participate in the fight this time? You should be glad that you belong to the White Lion camp. If you were a Black Lion, I would kill you with one shot without hesitation," the woman said calmly. "You can try it," the leader of the wolf clan sneered disdainfully. "The situation is becoming more and more complicated. The Demon Hunter Alliance, the Wolf Clan, the Wiseman government, and the Clown King are all well-deserved behemoths. Any one of them has the power to completely destroy the others. Some forces saw that the situation was wrong and had quietly begun to retreat. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 216. Talai Mercury and others also quietly retreated a distance to avoid being noticed. Looking at the three generals, the leader of the Wolf clan, and the leaders of the three major demon hunter forces from a distance, the three parties negotiated with each other for a while, and seemed to be getting more and more nervous. The wolves and the demon hunters quickly drew out their weapons and firearms to confront each other. SHH. With a whistle, everyone in the wolf tribe rushed out and rushed towards the demon hunter in a fan shape. For a moment, there were gunshots, low roars, wolf howls, and all kinds of sounds mixed together. The demon hunters and the wolves were suddenly in a melee, with bloody limbs splashing out from time to time. The wolves are ferocious and violent. When angry, their bodies can expand to 1.5 times their original size. Their defense and recovery capabilities are amazing. As long as their heads are not broken, they can still move. The demon hunters have a fierce style, and the weapons in their hands seem to be very sharp, and they can cut off the limbs of the wolves in one stroke. Although his strength is weaker, he is rich in experience and is inseparable from the wolves. The surrounding forces also retreated one after another. The demon hunters always used the tactics of attacking the wolves with more and less, but this time it was almost a one-on-one battle. It shows that this group of demon hunters is far more elite than others. One arm of the red-eyed woman was glowing with metallic luster, and she was fighting fiercely with the wolf leader. Her red cloak was flying up and down, like a red flame surrounding the wolf leader. Ouch! The wolf leader howled loudly. Enough! Bediga, among the three generals, a tall and lanky man next to the right of Glory stepped forward and shouted. There are more than just masters like us on this island. Do you want to lose both sides? Unfortunately, it's still a step too late. As the leader of the wolf tribe Bediga howled wildly, the wolf tribe's eyes suddenly turned red, and their speed suddenly increased a lot. Eliminate the demon hunters also shouted, and each took out a syringe and slapped it on their arm. A light red potion is injected into the body. The scene suddenly became chaotic. With the main forces in chaos, the three generals were short of manpower and insufficient to maintain the entire situation. Some organizations and forces that had a grudge against each other also began to take action, taking the opportunity to make sneak attacks. Mercury and the others in the tower retreated again and again, and suddenly a whirling scimitar whizzed towards them. Get out of the way! Bai Ying swung his sword towards the scimitar. Clang! The scimitar was split into two pieces and pierced into the stone statue behind them. But at the same time, the two groups that were fighting also moved over while fighting, dividing the crowd into two sides. Silan and the appraisal expert were together, and Talai Mercury and Bai Ying were separated into two parts. Amidst the noise, Mercury in the tower tried his best to look in the direction of Miss Silan, but there were 7 or 8 people fighting in the middle. Just as he raised his head, a bullet hit the stone statue above his head. His ears were filled with the collision of weapons and people's roars, clothes flying, and the whistling wind. Nothing else is heard. After Bai Ying tried his best to block several scimitars, he was quickly regarded as an enemy by the other party and was directly included in the attack range, falling into a melee. He tried his best to protect Mercury in the tower, and looked anxiously at Miss Silan who was getting further and further away. What to do? We must try to get as close as possible. Otherwise, something will happen to Silan and the others in a place like this. Talai Mercury gritted his teeth and said loudly. Unknowingly, the two of them had been pushed further and further away, and Silan and others were completely out of sight. Talai Mercury tried his best to calm down. We must find a way. We must. He stood behind Bai Ying, leaning his back against the stone statue and narrowing his eyes slightly. The gap in strength is too big. The random group of people here are all the top elites of the world stone. They seem to be fighting fiercely in the melee, but in fact they all have ways to save their lives. Only the ones who are injured are not directly killed. Wrong, Mercury in the tower suddenly felt strange. Although the people around him were fighting fiercely, they seemed to be moving in a strange direction, which just separated them into two sides, and they were getting farther and farther away. They did it on purpose, he suddenly realized. White Eagle. Rush over, he shouted. Follow up. Bai Ying shook his sword without hesitation. Buzz. Black runes suddenly lit up on the rune sword, vibrating like ink liquid. Jiaji. It seemed like countless people were singing together with strange voices. The blade of the sword suddenly glowed with a trace of black light, and with a swish of swish, 3 phantoms of the same rune swords appeared in succession. It began to rotate rapidly around White Eagle and tower, like a high-speed gear fan. Before the 2 people fighting around them could react, they were cut by the high-speed rotating sword blade and quickly retreated. Where do you want to go? Suddenly, a sharp and strange sound came from the front. A red shadow floated over and collided with the White Eagle head-on. Puff! The sword shadow dissipated, and the White Eagle groaned, entangled with the red shadow. It's you again, he growled, trying to get away, but he was entangled and unable to move. Only then did Mercury in the tower realize that the red shadow was the weird clown who had appeared to intercept them before. It's the red clown. The clown held 2 short red thorns in his hands, stabbing towards the White Eagle like a storm, but with a strange and calm smile on his face. It was as if they were just performing an exquisite dance. Spiral fog! He screamed, and a large cloud of thick green mist exploded around him, covering a large area around him in an instant. Bai Ying and Talai Mercury were directly enveloped in it, and suddenly felt a choking feeling in their mouths and noses. We must find a way to join Silan and the others, Talai Mercury shouted loudly to Bai Ying. No. He hasn't left yet. Bai Ying had just taken a breath when he felt a red shadow flash on his left side, and a burning wound suddenly appeared on his arm. Laugh. Talai Mercury also had an additional wound on his back. What to do? Damn it, Bai Ying tried hard to suppress the anger in his heart. The situation in front of him was getting more and more dangerous. Even they were in such a mess. It was unimaginable to be on Sien's side. Ah! Silan exclaimed and took a few steps back, clutching her chest tightly. The black coat there was cut, revealing the white bra underneath. The force of the opponent's sword is not generally precise and delicate. Obviously it had been calculated long ago. At this time, she was standing together with the appraisal expert. The 2 of them huddled in the corner of the 2 statues, staring closely at the clown in red who was approaching in front of them. Luke, I'll hold him back, you find an opportunity and run away, Silan whispered calmly. At this time, her usual gentleness and solemnity also faded slightly, and there was a faint hint of anxiety in her eyes. Then what do you do? The appraisal expert wondered. I can't leave you alone. Just leave. I have a way to escape. Lan reluctantly pretended to be confident. But she knew that this time it was a serious disaster. She has never encountered such a dangerous situation since she followed Detective Mercury in the tower, whom she most admired. The enemy we met in front of us was not any criminal or murderer. Rather, it is the top assassination organization that is truly at the top of the world, Solitaire's clown troops. What she didn't expect the most was that the clown in front of her slowly took off his mask, revealing a woman's face covered with scars. Silan Ruby, ya, I haven't seen you for many years, but you have grown up and are still so beautiful. A sharp and dangerous voice came out of the woman's throat. The Mercury and the White Eagle in the distance tower forced me into a desperate situation by the Nile River. 12 years have passed. Silan only felt that her scalp was numb and her throat was dry. You are Cassadan. She could not forget that 12 years ago, when she was just a little girl, her parents were kidnapped and a large amount of their family property was extorted. The main murderer at that time was the woman in front of him, Starscream Cassadan. If Mercury and White Eagle hadn't passed by in the tower and rescued her, maybe the weeds on her graveyard would be as tall as a person by now. I didn't expect you to be alive, Sci-Lan bit her lower lip and said bitterly. The clown actually joined the playing cards. Thanks to you, not only did I not die, but I also became stronger. Cassadan's eyes flashed with a hint of madness. Do you know why I want to separate you alone? She smiled and clapped her hands gently. Soon, more than a dozen tall and strong men walked through the foggy surroundings, all wearing clown masks. You have been with Taili Mercury for so many years, but I didn't expect that you are still a virgin. What a pity. You have to be hummed to death at such a young age. You are not 25 years old, right? Such a young age. Tisk tisk. Starscream laughed sharply, raised his right hand suddenly, and with a sneer, a flying knife immediately cut through Scyllane's waist clothes, creating a wide gap. She tugged with her fingers and immediately retracted the flying knife. Another knife passed right between Scyllane's thighs and was nailed to the figure behind. The torn pants vaguely exposed the fair and delicate skin of her thighs. Ah, Scyllane took a step back in horror, leaning her back against the stone statue. Such delicate skin. Ah, Starscream moaned intoxicatedly, giving people a perverted and neurotic feeling. Hey hey. More than a dozen men around him stepped forward eagerly and surrounded Scyllane. Sci-Lan, run quickly, appraisal expert Yook rushed out and stood in front of Sci-Lan. With a bang, he was kicked away, rolled several times on the ground, and passed out. Yook, Scyllane's face turned pale. The three of Garen walked to the foggy central area and stared inside with gloomy expressions. Blow it away, Garen said solemnly. I'll do it. Andrila took a step forward and swung her sword casually. Swish, swish, swish. 3 silver mirrors instantly stood up in front of him, and a large amount of strong wind suddenly arose. A large amount of green mist was quickly blown away by the strong wind, revealing a chaotic area inside. People inside, listen, Nightmare said loudly and coldly, you have 10 seconds to hand over the Joker's people. His voice was directly facing everyone in the area. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 217. Otherwise. He waved his right hand, and an invisible force burst out. The air was faintly distorted, and a large number of stones on the ground were directly suspended, spinning and flying. Let out a loud scream. A huge mental tornado over 3 meters high and 4 meters wide suddenly formed. It's telepathy. Please stop, a steady voice came from the central area. We are Weissman's 5-star generals, and the Clown King you are looking for is not here. Tell them what to do, you arrogant people. Show them some color, a deep female voice came from inside. Tisk tisk tisk. There was a flash of red light, and a boomerang spun towards the 3 gallons at high speed. Shot right at Andrila. The edge of the boomerang flashed with a blue quenched luster, flying in mid-air, like a red full moon, dangerous and beautiful, and the surrounding air was also driven by strong winds. Andrila casually struck out with her sword. He cut the boomerang into 2 pieces with a scoff, and the fragments flew left and right. He moved easily and freely, just like performing a sword dance at will. Now, he has been improving himself like crazy and has firmly entered the world's first-class level. Although he is still far from the strongest level, he can already compete head-on with these top figures. In the entire world's strongest rankings, he is now ranked in the top 30. If it weren't for the Nightmares, Garen, and Palasha around him, all of them were the strongest perverts in the world. In comparison, he would be considered a top figure in any other organization. There are so many Nightmares on one side. His face was cold, and he was obviously really angry. Pointing in the direction of the dart. Go. Call. A large tornado of telekinesis flew in immediately. The green mist inside had not completely dissipated, and after the tornado rolled in, there was no sound at all. The display was silent for a moment, and then suddenly. Woo! A fierce and harsh roar of wind exploded in the center. The whole ground shook violently, and the statue forest also shook. A series of exclamations and screams came from the stone forest. It was obvious that no one knew how many people were hit by this bombardment. Go. Go in, Garen strode into the statue forest. Nightmare and Andrilla followed. Boom. In front of Scylla, Starscream and a group of Joker's subordinates stopped moving, each of them looking a little gloomy and uncertain. What should I do? Boss, a man asked Starscream in a low voice. They came specifically to target us. They dare to be so arrogant and domineering. They are definitely not ordinary forces. Now that the Clown King is gone, we can't stop them. Retreat. Retreat immediately, Starscream whispered quickly. Take this woman with you. Escape together, she glanced at Scylla who was lying limply on the ground. Two men stepped forward and were about to catch Scylla. Bang. Scylla flipped over and kicked the two of them hard on their lower abdomens. The two of them immediately let out a cry and staggered back 2 steps. Smelly bitch, the two men stepped forward to grab Scylla again. Woo! Suddenly a strong wind rushed over. The violent airflow suddenly hit Starscream and the others, and the black stones it carried hit the backs of a circle of people like bullets. Instead, Scylla and Yuk escaped on the ground. A group of people were immediately knocked to the ground. 4 or 5 people were bleeding from their orifices on the spot. It looked like they were dying. The surrounding green mist was immediately blown away completely. Kill her, Starscream screamed. Bang. Suddenly, he kicked her hard in the stomach, knocking her against a stone statue not far away. A tall and strong figure slowly stood next to Starscream and stepped on her. The figure is a tall man with a golden earring on his left ear and short purple-black hair blowing slightly in the wind. The eyes are high up, as if looking down at all living things, and are as scarlet as gems. Tell me, where is the Clown King? The man's leather boot stepped on Starscream's head and crushed it gently. This sound, Miss Scylla was startled and suddenly came back to her senses from the surprise. His eyes were fixed on the tall man in front of him. You're Mr. Kelly, she yelled. The man was stunned, turned his head slightly and looked in. Miss Scylla. Garen looked at the disheveled Miss Scylla inside in astonishment. Mr. Kelly's words reminded him of the time when he, Taili Mercury and others pretended to be an appraisal expert. What's wrong with Garen? A tall, handsome, and slender man appeared next to Garen. He frowned and glanced at Scylla. Nothing, I just saw an acquaintance, Garen replied calmly. I want to run. Suddenly, a nightmare scream came from the distance. The corners of Garen and Andrilla's mouths twitched. The hobby of nightmares is still so weird. Just get used to it. Let's go and have a look. Andrilla turned around and walked in the direction of the sound. Garen turned around. Miss Scylla, do you want to come together? Of course. Scylla quickly stood up, but she closed her legs tightly in embarrassment, and the inner thighs that were scratched by the flying knife vaguely showed a trace of spring. Garen laughed and walked over, holding one in each hand, grabbing Scylla and Yuk together, and quickly followed Andrilla. While Garen was moving at high speed, Scylla's eyes were blown open by the wind and she hurriedly asked loudly. Mr. Kelly, why did you suddenly come to this island? I just came here to do some errands and find something, Garen replied casually. What about you? Mercury should be in the tower too, right? Yes, yes. They were separated from us. Scylla gritted her teeth. Excuse me, was the one who was chasing the Clown King just now your companion? I don't know him, Garen flatly denied it. It would be extremely embarrassing to really admit that he and Nightmare were together. While talking, the two of them had arrived at the central area, the clearing where all the fog had been blown away. There were some corpses lying scattered on the ground, and there were three figures in the middle besieging a woman. The besieged woman wore sharp golden claws on her hands and swiped in one direction, causing the people in that direction to dodge and retreat. Only then did Scylla notice that the three generals of Wiseman, the leader of the demon hunters, the red-eyed woman, and a strange figure in a clown costume were besieging this woman. "Humph," Andrila snorted coldly, "Nightmare, do you want our help?" "No need," the besieged woman chuckled sharply, and her claws made more than 10 claw marks, which remained in the air for a long time. Directly forcing back the three people around her, she suddenly spun around. Succeed. The claw marks drawn by the golden claws in the air slowly dispersed and faded according to some mysterious rules, but everyone who saw the scene felt their heads swelled and dizzy. Suddenly I felt horrified, and I quickly looked away, not daring to look again. The three people who besieged Nightmare all backed away in shock, but at this moment, the clown stumbled, lost his balance, and fell backwards. "Let's go," a cloud of smoke suddenly exploded around the other two people, turning into two other clowns and rushing away in three directions. Nightmare clawed at the fallen clown. "Queen!" the other two clowns shouted anxiously. After the surrounding smoke cleared, Weissman's three generals each killed their opponents and gathered together. I also saw a scene in the middle where the Nightmare and the clown were fighting. "It's from the Clown King." "How dare you actually come out?" Glory Quan snorted coldly, "Who is that person who was besieged?" "It seems like the King of Nightmares in White Peacock." Hiss. As the words spread, there was a gasping sound all around. "The King of Nightmares is not the strongest person in the world, but he is the most terrifying. He can control 90% of people to do shameful things that he can't even imagine. This kind of thing did not happen once or twice, but had many precedents. For example, he was hypnotized to strip naked and run around naked, or he stuck his butt out and licked the floor in the toilet. Or used the cesspit as a swimming pool. Just imagining this kind of thing makes people shudder." When they heard about the Nightmare King, not only the general forces, but also the demon hunters and the wolves quickly retreated calmly. Even the Right of Glory himself frowned slightly. The enemies of the Nightmare King have countless glorious deeds. The once glorious Archbishop of the Church, Lord Hoster, was accidentally hypnotized by him because he was chasing the King of Nightmares. During the fight with countless people watching, he suddenly stopped and masturbated on the spot. An 87-year-old man masturbating like crazy in front of hundreds of people. Afterwards, the old man committed suicide on the spot, and the name of the Nightmare King spread throughout the world. Just now, the clowns pretended to be us and attacked the Nightmare. "Do you want to explain?" the big man with black chest and hair asked in a low voice. "Explain what?" "Don't lose our Weissman's face," Glory Quan gritted his teeth. "The King of Nightmares and the Clown King are also our enemies. As long as you speak, we will definitely kill them together," Bediga of the Wolf Clan immediately spoke. "The same goes for our Demon Hunter Alliance," the red-eyed woman recalled the deeds of the glorious Archbishop of the Church, immediately shuddered, and quickly agreed. The other forces responded one after another, fearing that they might accidentally move too slowly. "Who attacked us just now?" Nightmare grabbed the clown's head with one hand and controlled him from moving while looking around. A circle of empty space was in a mess, and Nightmare was surrounded by everyone. He looked around without any fear at all. No one answered. "It's just that the leader of the demon hunters, Elizael, has a gloomy expression." Garen walked to him with Scylla, and Andrila also slowly stood up. "Perhaps we can ask something from this guy." Garen glanced at the clown who was held by Nightmare in his hand. "Those people just called this guy Queen, he probably has a high status. Kill me. Kill me and there will be endless queens to kill." He, the clown laughed sharply and strangely. Kill you, Nightmare sneered, there is nothing easier than death. It's not that easy to die. Before this time tomorrow, we have 1 day to find the clown and kill him completely. Andrilla looked at her watch and said calmly. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 218. We were attacked by them as soon as we landed on the island, and it seemed that everyone who came to the island was attacked. Solitaire obviously had some ulterior conspiracy. We all came for the keys, and we all came for the black tobacco pot. Garen raised his voice. I think some of you want to get the black smoke pot, and some want to see the power of the black smoke pot. But no matter what your purpose is, at least now that the ruins have not been opened, we have no conflict of interest. Absolutely. There is no need to cause meaningless casualties, and I feel that the Clown King seems to want to deliberately provoke a fight between us. Yes, the Clown King's men have the ability to disguise themselves as others. It's easy to provoke conflicts, someone echoed. Garen and the others stood in the center, and the other forces surrounding them surrounded them. When these forces come to the island, most of them know that they are not strong enough, so they just come here to try their luck, and those who can break through the Clown King's blockade are all determined forces. Among them, some are unknown and have just appeared suddenly, while some have become famous and are not small figures in the local area. But no matter who is standing here, they all have their deepest expectations, that is, they are here for the black tobacco pot. Even Weissman's 3 generals were the same. In the name of capturing the Clown King, in fact, the real purpose was not to catch the black smoke pot. The black smoke pot of the previous generation claimed to have truly achieved its purpose of communicating with the underworld. The whole scene seemed a bit chaotic at this time. Everyone doesn't know what the other forces think. Therefore, any force must be on guard against other surrounding forces. Most people's attention was now focused on the 3 white peacocks and Galen in the center. Even if the King of Nightmares is too famous, who standing here would really give up the black smoke pot because of this? The forces that dare to stand here are the forces that are determined to break through no matter what the obstacles are. Those who should compromise have already compromised and will not come to the island at all. What's your attitude as white peacocks? Glorious Quan, the leader of Weissman's 3 generals, was the first to speak. The Clown King gave up the black smoke pot, chose to join the Immortal Palace, and formed an alliance with them to help the Immortal Palace fight for it. So what is your intention? He paused. If I remember correctly, although you white peacocks are just, it was established not long ago, but it actually has a feud with Immortal Palace, right? The 3 white peacocks have actually already acquiesced that Jialong will take the initiative to take the lead. Needless to say, Andrilla felt that she was no match for Galleon, but Nightmare simply had no intention of doing so. Garen took a step forward and looked at the glorious power. The black smoke pot is not our main purpose. Indeed, as you said, our purpose is actually the Immortal Palace. Glorious Power nodded. Then how about we join forces? On the one hand, our purpose is to capture the Clown King, which should be the same as yours. You and the Clown King should also have conflicts. On the other hand, it is mainly for the black smoke pot. That's our real purpose. Join forces. Garen did not expect that Weissman's 3 generals would actually make this proposal, but looking at the sincere expression on the face of Glory Quan, one knew that the other party was indeed sincere. The Nightmare on the side whispered with telepathy, he wants to ease the bad relationship between the hunting team and hunting you. I think they even have plans to recruit us. Garen nodded calmly to show that he heard. During the battle at the Red Sand Sword Gate, he was attacked by Weissman's hunting team. Although it was nothing serious, it was indeed a hurdle for both parties. What are the benefits of joining forces? He asked loudly. You help us get the right to use the black smoke pot, and we will help you when we encounter the Immortal Palace. The Immortal Palace is also a serious problem for us, Glory Quan replied loudly. Why should I trust you? I have been in Hull for 25 years, and I have never said anything untrustworthy. Glorious Quan's face was calm. As the two asked and answered, the other forces around them became a little unsteady. White Peacock and Weissman were already very powerful. If they joined forces, they would not give other forces a chance. Some small forces that had originally miscalculated gradually began to withdraw from the central statue forest. They are very self-aware, and seeing that the situation has completely exceeded their imagination, they might as well exit early to avoid excessive losses later. The remaining slightly stronger ones, who were very confident in themselves, gathered together to temporarily form large groups. The three generals Garin and Weissman also noticed the changes in their surroundings. Now the North Territory should be dominated by the Immortal Palace. The North Pole King and the Thorn Spear have probably formed an alliance to boycott the Immortal Palace. The Right of Glory continued to persuade, if we add our support, the Immortal Palace will succeed this time. There's very little hope. He stared intently at Garin's face. This young man, who was only 20 years old, rose like a comet from the intelligence and directly dominated a province. He didn't pay much attention to it at first, but he didn't expect that now that he was close, it seemed that the opponent's strength exceeded his expectations. He immediately had the idea of winning over the other party. We, Weissman, welcome all knowledgeable and talented people to join us. If top people with both talents like the three of us join our Weissman, their remuneration will naturally not be mentioned, and their status will definitely be lower than ours. The three you might as well think about it. Now that the Federation is in turmoil, anyone can see how bad the situation is. Naturally, three of these top elites don't have to hang themselves on a tree. Wouldn't it be better to choose a larger stage and environment? The three gallants did not answer immediately. After Nightmare hypnotized Queen Joker, they immediately knew that it was the Joker who pretended to be Wiseman and attacked them in the first place. The three people's hatred of clowns deepened. Not to mention too much, our main thing now is to find the Clown King first. Garin avoided the topic of recruitment. I don't know why the Clown King suddenly sent so many cannon fodder to sneak attack everyone. But since they decided if you take action, you must be prepared to pay the price. He is extremely unhappy with the Clown King now. The Golden Sword Seat and the Golden Seal were lost because of them. This has been made clear, so killing the Clown King is also the main thing immediately, otherwise no one would feel comfortable being chased and bitten by such a louse. Glorious Quan looked at his watch. It's now 7:35 in the afternoon, and it will get dark soon. However, the surroundings here are full of white fog, and we can't feel any change in the sky. If we want to deal with the clown, we still have close to 24 hours. He looked around. I suspect the Clown King is hiding among all the people around here. Do we need to clear the place? Another general said in a low voice. We cooperated with the White Peacock and had the strength to completely clear the area. No hurry. Guangrong Quan shook his head. Garin temporarily acquiesced in the alliance with Weissman, and he and Nightmare Andrila walked to the side of General Weissman and stood there. The Nightmare is training the Clown Queen in various ways. Come, tell me, I am a pig. I am a pig. The clown looked dull. I love eating poop. I like to eat poop. I like eating fresh the best. I love eating fresh food. Garin and Andrila both felt a little nauseous as they watched Nightmare's training. They all knew what Nightmare was doing, and she wasn't just saying that, but was really prepared to let this clown do it. Miss Sillen's hair stood on end watching this, but what was more important now was to find Taileye Mercury and the others. Mr. Kelly, if you want to find the Clown King, then there is one person who can definitely help you a lot. She reluctantly withdrew her gaze, tidied herself up, and regained some composure. You mean Detective Tower? Garin frowned slightly. No need. Nightmare stood up. I already know the general information. A sneer appeared on his face. How dare you plant explosives halfway to attack us? And you dare to seek refuge in the Immortal Palace? In the remaining time, we will stay here for a long time, and it may be helpful to get the mercury back from the tower. Andrila has also heard of this man's reputation. Now, although we talk about it and Weiss man's people have formed an alliance, but when it comes time to open the ruins, they will still take action if they really want to. Who doesn't want a black smoke pot that can break through the limits? The current situation is only temporary. Then it will be dangerous to take full action. Garin nodded in agreement. It's a pity that Palasha doesn't know what his plan is. If he were here, maybe we would be more confident. The old man has different personalities at different times. No one knows what state he is in this retreat. But don't take it lightly, Andrila whispered. The black smoke pot can only be used by one person. At the last moment, even if it's you, I won't show mercy. Don't blame me. Each one depends on his ability. Garin smiled. The black smoke bottle, which can only be used by one person, not only communicates with the underworld, but also has the function of breaking through the limits. Therefore, no matter how good his relationship with Andrila is, he cannot give up his own path and dreams because of this relationship. They are both partners and rivals. Although he said he didn't want black tobacco pots, if Garin had the opportunity, he would naturally not let go of such an opportunity to break through the limits. The calm now is actually the calm before the storm. After Garin looked around, he said, "Let's go and see the detective in the tower." He put his arms around Miss Silen's waist, stepped on the ground lightly, and rushed out silently. The rest of the people around them only felt their eyes blur, and Garin and Silen had disappeared. Suddenly the gap between the two sides became clearer, and some people who considered themselves masters became more concerned about retreating. The black stone forest is composed entirely of thick stone pillars, which stand high on the ground like a forest. The lower part is made of stone, and the upper part is made of various carved figures. Some are miserable, some are joyful, some are intoxicated, and some are furious. The expressions are different, and the movements and postures are different. The gaps between each stone statue are very large, almost 3 or 4 meters, forming a branch extending in all directions between the stone statues. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 219. Garin ran with Miss Silen and followed the faint sound of fighting and began to search the surrounding area comprehensively. After searching 4 times in succession, we killed many of the Clown King's men, but we did not encounter Talai Mercury and the others. After running for hundreds of meters, a faint roar came from the mist ahead. Garin and the two quickly approached and saw White Eagle and a Red Clown fighting inextricably. Bai Ying is holding a white longsword with black runes rippling on the sword. His whole face has blue veins exposed and he looks a bit ferocious. But it was still becoming increasingly difficult to be suppressed by the clown in red. Talai Mercury was holding a pistol on one side and aiming at the two of them. He didn't know how to shoot. The two were moving too fast and switching positions very quickly, making it difficult to aim. Both the White Eagle and the Clown are speed types. The white sword light and the red clown's claws are intertwined and spinning. There is only the whistling of the wind, but no collision sound can be heard. Laugh. A blood hole appeared on Bai Ying's right arm, but his eyes were blood red and he ignored it. Mr. Kelly, seeing White Eagle becoming more and more dangerous, he fell into decline. Miss Silen looked at Garin anxiously. Garin nodded, stepped down, and instantly rushed between the two of them, stretching his arms to hit both of them at the same time. Bang bang. White Eagle and Joker were knocked back and separated at the same time. When the clown saw Garin, he turned around and ran away without saying a word. Garin narrowed his eyes and reached out to grab the clown's head. His fingers were like electricity, and almost all he could see was a white shadow. Who wants you to mind your own business? Suddenly, an extremely sharp sense of danger came from behind him. The roaring roar of the White Eagle sounded from behind. Bai Ying held the sword with both hands, his eyes filled with bloodshot eyes of hatred, and the white rune sword erupted with an unprecedented sharp aura, piercing Garin's vest. Bai Ying never expected that more than 10 years later, when he went to the island again, he would meet the murderer who killed his parents. The true identity of this clown in red is the murderer who killed his whole family. Although he had been suppressed previously, he had been preparing the strongest sword move. Unexpectedly, he was suddenly interrupted by Garen and had to explode in advance. The clown in red put away the small ball in his hand unwillingly. This is a prop specially designed to deal with rune swords. He has been waiting for White Eagle to explode the rune sword. This thing can eject all the power of the rune sword back. Damn it! If this guy hadn't suddenly appeared, he glared at Garen unwillingly. This is so close that we can completely kill Bai Ying and avoid future troubles. At this moment, when he saw Bai Ying stabbing Garen with his sword, he immediately began to gloat. The White Eagle rune sword stabbed Garen's vest hard. The runes on the rune sword rippled with a subtle black light, giving people a vague and inexplicable feeling. Unlike the Fire Sparrow Mother, the strongest point of White Eagle's rune sword is its sharpness. It can wear whatever it wants and cut whatever it wants. This is the first time Garen has felt a sense of crisis. He has never felt this feeling since he cultivated the god statue skill. Everything returns. Garen's arms shook, and an invisible air vibration exploded. Boom! A circle of transparent air ripples spread directly on his arms. The ripples spread out and hit White Eagle and Clown hard. The two of them flew out at the same time, fell heavily to the ground and slid far away. Garen's back muscles squeezed slightly, and the wound pierced by the sword tip quickly closed up, completely invisible. He looked back at White Eagle lying on the ground. "What are you doing? Mr. Kelly saved you, and you stabbed him with a sword." Silan quickly ran over to help Bai Ying up. At this time, the veins on Bai Ying's face slowly subsided. He spat out a mouthful of blood. The spirit was quite depressed. "You're not even a fighter, and you actually dare to go to Smoke Island." Garen shook his head speechlessly. "You are really brave enough." "Me?" Bai Ying stabbed Garen on impulse just now, and felt that he didn't know what to say at this moment. "I'm sorry that I was affected by the sword again just now." Garen shook his head and ignored him, but turned to look at Tailai Mercury, who was approaching. Tailai Mercury also seemed to recognize him, put away his pistol and walked over with a wry smile. "Mr. Kelly, I didn't expect to meet under such circumstances." "Yeah, I didn't expect that either." Garen shrugged. "You came to the island for the black tobacco pot?" "Of course not, we are self-aware," Tailai Mercury said helplessly. "Although it is a bit presumptuous, I still hope you can help us. To be honest, my daughter and Bai Ying's son were both kidnapped and brought here. The island, we haven't found it until now. You want me to help you find those two children? If you have anything of use to us, just tell us," Tailai Mercury promised readily. Garen hesitated for a moment. Mercury in Tailai was an old acquaintance, so helping him was not a big deal. "It's just a matter of time." Miss Silan also tied up the knocked-out clown in red with a rope, walked over and interjected, "The one who kidnapped the two children is the Clown King. Like Mr. Kelly, we also need to find the Clown King. So our goal is consistent." "Is that so?" Tailai Mercury's brows suddenly widened. "What's your opinion?" Garen pondered for a moment. "I can't stay here for long. If I can't solve it before tomorrow, I have to give up." Tailai Mercury lowered his head and thought for a while, then raised his head. "Give me 3 hours and I will catch the Clown King completely." "Oh," Garen looked at him slightly surprised. "You sure?" "Certainly." Garen said no more and led the detectives back, taking with them the clown in red who was knocked unconscious. Along the way, Bai Ying gritted his teeth and wanted to kill the man in advance, but he held back. The central area of the stone statue forest is a huge black stone ground in an oval shape, with the tallest black stone statue in the middle. This stone statue is more than 10 meters high. It makes the movements of a human-shaped lucky cat. It has a fat head and big ears, and a kind face. it is difficult to tell whether it is a boy or a girl. White smoke kept coming out of his nostrils, ears, and mouth, lingering around him in strands, giving people a sense of tranquility and mystery. At this time, the three generals Weissman and the wolf leader Betka had gathered under the stone statue, and they all sat down to rest, as if they planned to wait until tomorrow. Andrila and Nightmare stood beside the three generals. When they saw Garin walking over with a group of people, they automatically gave up their position. Jiulung didn't say anything. He brought Talai Mercury and others over, sat down cross-legged, and stopped caring about anything. However, Mercury and Miss Scylla in the tower stayed calm and began to wander around. Some of the surrounding forces have gone away, leaving only some people who are unwilling to try their luck. Talai Mercury used Galen's name to chat with them for a few words. I didn't understand the information clearly, but I had an intuitive understanding of Garen's strength. Talai Mercury's eyes were as calm as possible, hiding the shock in his heart. The second divine general of the Nantian Holy Fist section, the leader of the Bayun sect, Garin. This Kelly has hidden too much from us. What is the concept of a divine general? What level is it? Miss Scylla didn't know the situation in this regard. Even the appraisal expert and Bai Ying were a little curious and looked at the detective at the same time. None of them were from this circle, so they didn't know how powerful the title Galen was. Are people with golden rings strong? Bai Ying thought for a moment and asked in a low voice. Mercury in the tower didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He is the strongest leader in the history of the Golden Circle, bar none. Even the federal government did not pay attention to the Bayun sect under Garin, and gave him a province in disguise. Do you think he is strong or not? His. Only then did Miss Scylla, Bai Ying, and others fully realize the meaning of the divine general Garin. Then will he do anything to us? Bai Ying asked worriedly in a low voice. There are too many people who want my sword. It's as easy as crushing an ant to deal with us. Although your sword is strong, Garin probably hasn't taken it seriously yet. You see, he didn't show any surprise when he saw the runes on your sword just now. His expression proves that he has seen similar things before. Talai Mercury simply analyzed. Okay, don't say more, focus on finding the Clown King first. Is 3 hours too short? Miss Scylla asked worriedly. It doesn't matter, I already had an idea before, Talai Mercury replied confidently. Garin sat cross-legged at the feet of the largest stone statue, quietly watching the Mercury and others in the tower mill around on the field, squatting down from time to time to check for any traces. Do you really believe they can catch the Clown King? Nightmare asked boredly. I hypnotized those clowns, but I didn't get any clues. Let's try it. It doesn't require any effort on our part. It's always good to have someone to help, Garin said calmly. Then when do you plan to get the key? Nightmare asked. The key in the hands of the wolves is much easier than the keys in the hands of the three generals. As long as we want it, it will be very easy. There's no rush. Kill the Clown King first, Garin replied unhurriedly. Among the southern and northern territories, only one side can obtain the qualification to use the black smoke pot. In the end, there will be a fight. Even if you hold the key and are killed by people from the northern territory, it doesn't make any sense. In the end, you can really get the black smoke. There is only one pot of people. I didn't even think about the role of breaking the limit, but now I don't consciously want to participate in the competition, Andrila said softly to the side. The three of them stopped talking and just sat quietly on the ground. The surrounding white fog gradually dimmed, the sky gradually became gray, and the fog became thicker and thicker. Someone tried to light a torch, but it was soaked by the dense moisture and couldn't light up at all. Had to give up. The temperature is getting colder and colder, and some people with weak constitutions can't bear it. After Mercury wandered around for a while, he stopped moving and walked to a quiet place to quietly touch his chin and think, looking extremely absorbed. Garin didn't care about him. He only wanted a result. As for how the process came about, it didn't matter. His current focus was mainly on the white rune sword in Bai Ying's hand. The power of the sword was astonishing. Although it could barely pierce his skin, it was already more terrifying than the Fire Sparrow Mother's sword. However, it seems that the range attack is far inferior to that one, and the focus is obviously different. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 220. What Garen noticed was that the runes that would automatically flow and change on the sword were made of what materials? The same thing happened to the Fire Sparrow Mother back then, with red runes shining on the sword. This is no longer something that common sense can explain. Although the rune sword was not enough to pose a threat to him, it was able to pierce his skin. This alone made him dare not underestimate it. Bai Ying, can you show me your sword? Garen said quietly and calmly. Bai Ying was stunned, looked at Garen, and at the same time glanced at the detective. He hesitated. Can. He walked over and handed the rune sword to Garen. Garen took it and began to examine it carefully. Northern Territory. Somewhere in the thick fog. A dense forest of black figures. Xianflan was half kneeling on the ground, with thick, rough breath constantly blowing out from his nostrils. He pressed one hand on the ground and covered his heart with the other. Plop. 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 A clear heartbeat echoed throughout the stone forest like a drum. Xianfran bit his lower lip tightly, and the hand covering his heart kept grasping his clothes and muscles. The excruciating pain coming from his heart made him almost unable to concentrate. Even the vision was slightly blurred. Is that possible? The Fire Sparrow Mother walked out from behind a black stone statue, dressed in red, with the elf sword on his waist. Her whole body was clean and clear, like a pure flame. Even the feet seemed to have no trace of dust. It's okay. Xianflan reluctantly stood up and replied in a low voice. Just withdraw when the time comes. I suspect I may not be able to restrain myself. The Fire Sparrow Mother was silent for a moment. Don't force yourself. I know. But after suppressing it for so long, it's time to let go completely. Xianflan replied lightly. I really don't know whether your original choice was right or wrong. The Fire Sparrow Mother was a little helpless, and her figure slowly retreated, disappearing into the thick fog, and no trace could be seen anymore. At this time, there were faint sounds of rapid footsteps outside. You are actually hiding here. Xianfran, you are dead this time. The revenge for killing my father. It can finally be settled today. Be careful of other people in the Immortal Palace. Ace, let everyone be on alert. Yes. A series of human voices quickly approached the side. Waves of extremely powerful aura quickly surrounded Xianflan. These people are all top elites, and there are 4 or 5 auras among them that are able to release powerful spirit. They have reached the level of top fighters and are only a little weaker than Ansara. These people are all here for the Immortal Palace, and they are all enemies of Immortal Fran. Some of them are because Xianflan is too strong, so they should be cut off first to remove the threat of fighting for the black smoke pot. Plop. There was another heartbeat in Xianflan's chest, and his eyebrows gradually wrinkled together, and countless veins emerged and gathered at the center of his eyebrows. Call. He stood up, and there were 2 fleshy bumps under his armpits. Garen took the rune sword and inspected it carefully. The rune sword in his hand was no different from an ordinary long sword. There are no flowing runes, no special power effects. It seems to be just a simple long sword. It's amazing. He returned the rune sword to White Eagle. Although I didn't check out anything, some of the textures are really amazing. The sky has completely darkened, and the faint moonlight shines down from above, and a faint outline can be seen through the fog. Mr. Galen Tailai Mercury finally returned to Galen. I think I've been able to figure out who the Clown King is. Oh, Garen looked at him with interest. Are you sure? Okay, Tail-Eye Mercury nodded. Then tell me, where is the Clown King hiding? Garen looked at him intently. He carefully felt that everyone present, including the three generals Weissman, was all normal and nothing was out of the ordinary. Actually, the clown did not hide, but disguised himself as someone. Tail-Eye Mercury replied calmly. Pretend to be someone else. Silan and Mengui both came over to listen to the two men talking in low voices. Yes, it's just that his disguise is very realistic. It's difficult for ordinary people to see it, Tail-Eye Mercury said calmly. Don't you feel that the atmosphere here has been a little weird since just now? Oh, Garen then noticed that, indeed, starting from an hour ago, all the forces present seemed to be a little weird, and a weird atmosphere continued to pervade. He looked around intently. The Wolf Clan members gathered together minding their own business, not knowing what they were talking about. General Weissman and the three of them stayed quietly not far away, all closing their eyes to rest. The demon hunters seemed to be arranging something in a hurry and seemed extremely busy. Other forces, large and small, are also resting and recuperating separately. Is there a way to identify it directly? Garen turned his gaze back and looked at Mercury in the tower. Certainly. Tail-Eye glanced at the other people around him, his eyes calm and calm. Actually, the real Clown King is hidden in the most inconspicuous group of forces. His eyes suddenly looked towards a group of strangers in the corner. I'll ask the Lord of Garen's sect to take action immediately when he hears my shout, otherwise he will definitely run away again. No problem, Garen nodded. Okay. Tail-Eye Mercury's eyes were fixed on the group of people from unknown forces in the distance, and he raised his hand as if to identify the specific people. The real Clown King. Catch the White Eagle. He yelled loudly, turned around and ran behind Garen. At this moment, no one reacted. The White Eagle changed color instantly, and the rune sword suddenly drew a fan-shaped sword shadow, slashing at the Mercury in the tower. Snapped. A strong gust of wind suddenly blew away his sword, causing his head to tilt. This wind was actually a breath of white breath released by Garen when he opened his mouth. He jumped up, grabbed the White Eagle rune sword with one hand, and pinched his neck with the other. Like a tiger pouncing on a sheep, it brings with it a strong wind and chill. Woo! White Eagle screamed, sheathed her sword and stepped back. She dropped her toes a few times and was actually one step faster than Garen. She jumped 3 times in mid-air to avoid Garen's pounce. It's you again. Mercury in the tower. I originally planned to let you go, but you are seeking death on your own. Today I will kill you completely. I want to see how you kill the people I protect. Garen's voice was cold. I, the Clown King, have never failed to assassinate anyone. After the Clown King landed, a human skin mask was torn off his face, revealing a strange face of a man painted with oil paint. Garen was about to take action when he suddenly heard Mercury groaning in the tower behind him. Look back. Detective Tail-Eye was actually clutching his right arm, his face was bruised, he was obviously poisoned. And the scarlet wound on his arm was obviously injured just now. You are looking for death. Garen suddenly became angry. Boom. A big hole suddenly exploded under his feet, and he rushed out like an arrow, grabbing the Clown King's throat with his right hand. Before the person arrived, a transparent force penetrated out of thin air, and it was sinister and hidden. Just when the transparent force almost touched the Clown King's throat, an extremely powerful and ferocious impact suddenly rushed out from the side, hitting Garen's arm accurately and knocking him away. Boom! Hitting one side of the stone statue with his claws, he immediately grasped the black stone into tofu-like powdery sand, and dug out a large chunk from it. The sputtered fragments hit the ground in the distance, and small holes appeared. Just the sputtering fragments from the aftermath were so powerful that everyone around them felt chills in their hearts. The Clown King was even more chilly. If he hadn't been rescued, he would have been torn into two pieces. Garen was furious. With this sneak attack, he could kill the Clown King directly without knowing his strength. The opponent was unable to use any of his moves and was torn into two pieces just like the clown before. If someone hadn't suddenly jumped out from beside him and smashed his arm. He watched helplessly as the Clown King retreated and fled far away like a frightened rabbit. I felt increasingly unhappy. Look at the people who are blocking you. It's you. His eyes suddenly opened wide, with an expression of surprise and astonishment on his face. Not only him, but also Andrilla and Nightmare looked extremely surprised. Originally, they thought Garen could handle it on his own. After all, no matter how strong the Clown King was, he was still ranked below on Sara, making him vulnerable to a head-on confrontation. But I didn't expect that such twists and turns would suddenly occur. Let's go after him. Andrilla stood up abruptly, holding the hilt of the sword in her hand, but said nothing. Nightmare also looked serious at this time and looked around. The surrounding wolf leader, demon hunter leader, and Weissman's three generals all stood up at this time and stared at this side. Moreover, their positions vaguely showed an encircling formation. The Clown King laughed sharply and stood looking over from a distance. Weissman's generals have long wanted to deal with you, the elites of the Federation. I didn't expect you to foolishly negotiate terms with others and form a temporary alliance. Idiots. The Right of Glory stood there with his arms crossed. White Peacock, as long as you agree to join me, Weissman, I don't want to ruin my credibility for many years because of you. Garen turned a deaf ear, but his eyes gradually calmed down and he looked at the person blocking him in front of him. I thought you would take action later, but I didn't expect you would do it so early. In fact, he had already thought of this situation, and Weissman's people were not trustworthy. I just didn't expect it to be so early. The figure in front of him looked at Garen calmly. Actually, for me, you are the biggest threat. Give up, you have no hope. Pelosa, do you really think you can suppress me? Garen casually tore off his upper body clothes, revealing his fair and strong upper body. Don't forget, I am the #1 Divine General. Pelasha also took off his upper body coat, revealing a black close-fitting martial arts uniform. The person blocking him in front of him was the Whitebird Holy Fist Pelasha who had separated earlier. He didn't know what kind of agreement he had formed with the Clown King, but he actually temporarily rescued the other party. Boring. Garen slowly clasped his hands together, as if worshipping and saluting the Buddha statue. As his palms slowly faced each other, a huge invisible airflow slowly surrounded him. The self-image is so successful that I have never used my full strength even once. Don't let me down, Pelasha. His eyes suddenly opened and he thrust forward with both hands. Idle. Zifang Fist. Grumble. As Garen took action, two huge giant bird wings suddenly appeared on both sides of his body. They were huge wings like phoenix birds, transparent and invisible, and thrust forward with his hands. The crisp phoenix calls continuously. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 221. This is a set of fighting skills that he has compiled that is most suitable for him by combining many secret martial arts and the fighting system within the Golden Statue Kung Fu. Dongwang Xiao and Zifang Fist are the two most essential moves among them. Garen understood that facing an opponent like Pelasha, ordinary moves were completely meaningless, so he simply used special moves as soon as he came up. Put your palms together and stab forward. The huge phoenix wings are formed by the momentum, squeezing the opponent's acupuncture points from both sides, forming a huge impact and oppression in an instant, forcing the opponent to resist head-on. This is a powerful ultimate attack that combines acupuncture points, spirit, and killing moves. Garen thrust his hands straight forward, like extremely sharp drills, towards Pelasha's chest. Once stabbed by this move, and then the two sides of the clasped palms are divided, the victim will be torn into two pieces. The same result as Dongguangxiao. If it is said that Dong Wang's hand uses strong speed and strength to squeeze the invisible air current to kill people, then Zifeng Fist is the essence of Garen's real skill fusion. Palasha grabbed his right arm in front of him, and made quick counts with his left hand. With a tearing sound, the right arm suddenly swelled, and countless dense black auras lingered around it, crawling and flowing on the arm like insects. Secret method. Snake scale arms. In an instant, the transparent phoenix wings and the black auras suddenly collided. Huge airflow also blew in all directions at the same time. Boom! The ground shook violently, and everyone's feet felt numb, and their whole bodies were numb from the huge vibration. Some of the stone statues that had been knocked crooked by the previous fight suddenly collapsed and broke, and rubble was scattered on the ground. Andrila drew her sword and took a few steps forward, but was stopped by Weissman's black-chested general. "It seems that you are really planning to help the Clown King stop us." Andrila casually made a few sword marks and stared at the general in front of her. "Unfortunately, you are a bigger threat than the Clown King. Once we deal with you, we will naturally kill the clown." The general laughed. "Kill us? Just you?" Andrila sneered, "although I don't know what the Clown King relies on to bring you together, but Garen's strength is beyond your imagination. The Nightmare King is no longer the nightmare he used to be. Stop talking nonsense, let's look at the real strength." The black-chested and hairy general didn't waste any words. He pulled out two black pistols with both hands and turned them around in a swishing circle. In front of the nightmare is the female leader of the Witchers, Elizare. "King of Nightmares, you are indeed very strong, but I am just clinging to you. Once you deal with the two over there, it will be your end." Demon Hunter Elizal sneered. "Are you kidding?" Nightmare yawned. "What do you think?" Eliza took out a black ribbon from her pocket and actually blindfolded herself. 80% of your hypnotic ability relies on vision. Unfortunately, my strongest state is when I don't use my eyes. Oh, Nightmare became slightly serious. Elizare's strength is also second to none among demon hunters. She is the most powerful demon hunter in the contemporary era. Naturally, this title is not just for boasting. But how many of those who can go to the Smoke Island are weak? All of them have strong strength and record. If you really want to compare them, you can only know by comparing them face to face. Bang! Garen's right paw pressed on Palasha's arms, and the sharp nails of his 5 fingers dug deeply into the muscles of Palasha's arms. Secret technique. Shadow Fist. Palasha's arms suddenly became blurred, and suddenly appeared on Garen's chest as if there were an extra pair of arms. Idle. Ruby. Garen had no intention of avoiding it, and there was a hint of ferocity at the corner of his mouth. A palm print of his left hand passed over. The palms were all red, with a faint jade-like red luster. Even blood vessels, muscles, and bones are faintly visible. Bang! There was another muffled sound, and the two of them were separated by the force of the earthquake, and each took a few steps back. A blackened palm print appeared on Palasha's chest, and blood oozed from his mouth and nose. His fingers quickly tapped his body a few times, and a small square patch on his chest and abdomen disappeared in a flash, and his face suddenly became much better. "Come again." Garen ignored it and rushed forward again. The footsteps hit the ground hard, bang bang bang. Like a giant elephant charging madly, its huge legs, as heavy as stone pillars, hit the ground heavily. Every time you step on it, you can hear a heavy vibration. Compared to Palasha, the two palm prints on his chest were only shallow marks on the surface of his skin and were not serious at all. The two collided with each other again, fighting head-on fiercely, leaving no room for error. After Palasha went into seclusion, he barely regained some of the strength he had in his prime. And this is not the first time Garen has tested his strength. Every time the two sides fight, there will be a violent burst of airflow, with strong winds constantly blowing around, high-intensity air squeezing, and ferocious air explosions constantly making sounds, like setting off firecrackers. Snapped. Before Palasha could catch his breath, Galen slapped him on the shoulder. He took more than 10 steps back, and his fingers hurriedly used secret techniques to quickly heal the injury. He lunged at Garen again. There was no pause. The two of them fought in just a few seconds, and the whole stone forest was in a mess, and no one could intervene. After knocking Palasha away with one palm, Garen rushed forward and grabbed both of Palasha's arms at the same time. "Wait until I tear off your limbs and see if you can recover," he was showing some ferocity. The super endurance of the god statue skill allowed him to burst out at full strength for days and nights. Now he is simply a humanoid mecha, tireless and able to recover quickly even after being injured. After all, the god statue skill is still known for its super recovery power. A series of confrontations were all head-on, and Palasha couldn't stand it anymore. With a bang, he opened his claws, staggered, and was hit with another palm. Another mouthful of blood spilled out of his mouth. Although at the same time, he also kicked Garen in the lower abdomen. But it was obvious that the opponent was planning to trade injuries for injuries. Looking at the fierceness of the Garan dragon, it was much improved compared to the last time. The attack hit him hard and was a bit overwhelming. "Do it," Palasha suddenly roared. Garen was suddenly startled, and suddenly felt a huge strong wind rushing towards him, hitting his vest on the back. Bang! Garen took a few steps forward and dug his feet into the ground to steady his body. Before he had time to think about it, 5 powerful and terrifying threats came from all sides of his body, as well as from the top of his head. Except for Palasha, each of the other 4 strands is at least as powerful as Ansara, and the most powerful one among them is even similar to Palasha. 5 top masters attacked at the same time. Garen felt as if the air around him was being sucked out, as if a vacuum had been formed. The skin on the body, face, and arms were all squeezed by the huge wind pressure, leaving traces and ripples. Seen from above, Garen stood alone in the middle, surrounded by 4 people: Holy Fist Palasha, Glory Power Hell, Wolf Clan Bediga, and Clown King. On top of his head is the last Weissmon general, holding a tuning fork-like spike from top to bottom, stabbing Garen's head. 5 huge strands of energy suddenly entangled and converged, all rushing towards the Garen in the center. "Palasha, you have fallen." Garen laughed maniacally and spread his arms wide. His skin began to spread a light white gold color quickly. It was as white gold as platinum, with an inexplicable sense of holiness and purity. A ball of platinum gold aura instantly gathered around him. Countless platinum airflows gathered together and gradually formed a weird pattern. That was a huge platinum face, the face of Garen himself. Boom! Platinum spirit suddenly burst out. Northern Territory. The entire Northern Territory was filled with blood and corpses, and there were almost no living people in sight. Only the central area. In the center, in a messy and bloody open space, Xianflan stood quietly on the mutilated body, his face covered with splashes of blood. He released an extremely terrifying black aura, like thick black oil, covering all the surrounding areas, as if entering a dark hell. Between his eyebrows, countless veins gathered together and squeezed into a strange mark that looked like eyes. "It's like growing a third eye." Mal, the assassin's spear, was kneeling not far from him. A short spear in his hand was broken into 2 pieces. A big hole was pierced in his shoulder. You could almost see the white mist behind him. The Arctic King was pale and lying unconscious not far away. There were broken metal fragments on the ground around it, which seemed to be from the plane. The Gun King Nikan was directly broken into 2 pieces, his eyes were wide open, and he could not rest in peace. Boom! Between the countless mist in the distance, a white gold aura soared into the sky. The spirits of all creatures on the entire island were shaken. Xianflan looked towards the South Territory from a distance, as if he could vaguely see Garen's face. The spirit condenses into shape for a moment, he seemed to see the invincible figure of his youth again. Elder brother. He pointed to the sky. Boom. Countless black auras suddenly formed air pillars, rushed into the sky, and turned into a huge face. It was not his, but the face of a soft and charming woman. For a time, two huge human faces in the southern and northern regions echoed each other and faced each other from a distance. Garen stood quietly on the spot, with countless platinum auras spreading around him, dyeing the entire central area white. He stood alone in the center, with white gold skin all over his body, clear and eye-catching, as if he was the only true god in heaven and earth. The three generals, Palasha, Clown King, and others were all suppressed by platinum chi. His body was more or less injured by the blow just now, and his strength was greatly damaged. At this time, he was suppressed by the spirit and tried his best to counterattack, but it didn't work at all. He could only move within a small area of his own spirit. Garen looked towards the North Territory. In the sky there, a black face was looking away from him. The spirit condenses into form. Immortal Fran.